Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube, and it's time for our Wednesday show, Sam. Huge show, monster show. The great Matt Harmon is going to join us. I think he's earned the great label.
Okay.
Like Alejandro Villanueva and Morgan Moses. He's in that type of league.
He's a very different person to Alejandro and Morgan Moses, certainly a lot smaller.
Yeah, but like Alejandro, who's got a history of wide receiver,
yeah,
you know that's Matt Harmon's specialty. So he's going to be on to break down all of the rookie wide receivers from this year. We'll do a little look back at the draft and then a review of all those rookie receivers. So that's coming up in just a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit of Monday Night Football, the last wild card game with the Rams' 27-9 win over the Vikings. We got an autopsy on the Steelers, God willing. We'll see if we can get through the whole show in time to get there. Shouty Shows and the whole bit. So great Wednesday show here planned for everybody.
Nice. Sounds good.
You sound excited.
Sure.
Ready to go. It's all brought to you by PrizePicks. I'll be unveiling my lineup today. Don't forget, you guys can join in, use the promo, check the mic. You get $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, man, let's get into the one game we have not fully reviewed yet. We did it in instant reaction form. I don't know how much it'll be different as far as review goes. Maybe you've cooled off just a little bit. But 27-9, Rams get the win, move on to the divisional round. They're going to take on the Eagles Sunday afternoon in the 3 o'clock window. Rams pull the upset here against the Vikings. Vikings finish the season now 14-4, including the playoffs. 2 losses to the Lions and 2 losses to the Rams in games after playing the Lions.
Yeah, remarkable symmetry to the season. Undefeated in games where they don't have to either play Detroit or then play after playing Detroit. Honolulu flu games. You know, if they avoid those games, they're good. What a remarkable collapse, I think, from Minnesota. I mean, I tweeted that they basically squeezed the entire Philadelphia Eagles collapse from last season into 8 days. That's remarkable efficiency. I mean, a week ago...
An 8-day collapse.
Yeah, like a week ago, this team was playing a game for the 1 seed where the entire playoffs would have gone through Minnesota. They would have been, split the series with Detroit. They would have sort of finally answered, are they for real? Well, they just knocked off another 1 seed contender. They are the 1 seed. Like, it would have been hard to argue they're not. And then they get absolutely taken apart by Detroit last week. And then this week, they look like they were still apart. And the Rams continued to take them apart, just stomped on the pieces. And you have to give credit to the Rams. They look great on both sides of the ball. I do, however, think that this result was far more about Minnesota than it was about the Rams. And, you were making the point in the reaction show, their defense has been amazing the last few weeks. They've barely given up any points. Some of those games are against teams that look pretty good. Some of them are not. Coming out of this game, it's just very hard to gauge what this means about the Rams because I think the Vikings were bad on both sides of the ball for varying different reasons. Sam Darnold, who'd been so good for 16 weeks, 15 games this season, the last 2 games was seeing ghost Sam Darnold. Like it's like somebody hit the reset button. Kevin O'Connell spent, an entire season rewiring this guy the way we've talked about that he did with Kirk Cousins, like deployed new software in Darnold's brain, had fixed him, had created this new player, and then someone went in there and flashed the memory, and Darnold just reset all the way back to seeing ghost Sam Darnold. And the last 2 weeks, I mean, he completely imploded in a way I didn't think was still on the cards up until that point. I mean, I was on Matthew Collar's podcast, and we were talking about how it would basically be impossible at this point to walk away from Darnold, given what he's done for the Vikings. And it seems so implausible that I don't think we even brought it up. Like, what happens if the last 2 weeks are such a complete implosion that, you almost go, well, he's the same guy again. That didn't seem on the cards, and yet that's exactly what happened. I mean, complete and total meltdown.
He had been, Darnold, playing extremely well under pressure this year, and I thought what was most impressive to me with Darnold was the pocket movement, was his ability to get through reads. He did get sacked a bunch this year, but still, again, offset that by throwing the ball down the field and doing that effectively. The other thing that we really complimented Darnold about was the amnesia that I always call it, right? You have a bad play, but you still come back. You forget that bad play. You don't let it fester. The opposite definitely happened in these last couple of weeks. There was a point, against Detroit, he went 4 of 18 when under pressure, 4 for 18. And then there was a point in the Rams game, he started to make some more throws under pressure as the game went on, but there was a point where that stretch went to 4 for 21. But overall, over the last 2 weeks, 14 of 35 when pressured, 3 turnover-worthy plays per PFF, and sacked 11 times. And then the 9 sacks against the Rams, of course, anytime there's a high sack total, you say, oh, the Rams front, they played great. Yes. Jared Verse, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, those guys got after it up front. Timely blitzes. They had a couple sacks from defensive backs. The Rams, again, outstanding up front, but 9 sacks. How many times are you watching saying, this play is taking too long, throw the ball? I mean, that was the consistent theme watching this game. Get rid of it at least 5, 6, 7 times, where it's more, it might have been quick pressure, but it was a long developing play that led to a sack, and also untimely sacks, right? Like, we're in field goal range, or we're in third down. We need to get to fourth and manageable because we're down a couple possessions here, and you're taking a big negative play. So just the game management aspect of things from Darnold over these last couple weeks was pretty poor.
Yeah, we were talking about this a bit before we came on the air. Like, the way, somebody like PFF who's charting sacks, it's all or nothing. It's binary, right? Somebody gets charged with the sack, and it's either, is that the offensive lineman? Is it a running back? Is it the quarterback? Is it the play? The play call is a factor. Realistically, they're all varying factors in the same thing, and whoever has the most ends up getting 100% of the sack. So when you're looking at this, and it's like, PFF has directly charged Darnold with 3 of those sacks, right? So 3 of the 9, 33.33% is on Darnold directly based off PFF's numbers, which is to say he's the most responsible factor on that individual play.
Which is a monster number, by the way.
Yes.
Right? Most quarterbacks aren't going to average 1 per game. So they're not going to have more than 17 in a season. He had 3.
Everybody else in the wild card weekend except Jalen Hurts is only responsible for 1 sack maximum. Hurts at 2, and then Darnold with 3. I think you can get 6 sacks deep into the 9 before you find one where he's not the most at-fault factor. Like, first one, right? It's a coverage sack, technically, but there's a check down to the left Darnold doesn't even look at, doesn't even want to throw, never bothers with it, right? It's still like looking downfield, trying to find something by the time the sack closes in on him. Second one, it's a bubble screen. He doesn't even throw it. Like, he pulls out of a designed wide receiver screen and is looking downfield by the time the pressure arrives on him. Like, this is why, when you're sort of blaming, how much is Kevin O'Connell to blame? And I think a week ago against Detroit, there was quite a lot of blame for O'Connell for not adjusting. But this is one where O'Connell is called a wide receiver screen. The ball's supposed to come out quickly. It's one where Darnold doesn't have to think, doesn't have to worry, doesn't have to read. It's just there, right? And Darnold's like, nope, looking downfield, trying to find a play. That's a problem. Number 3, it's play action. There's a blitz coming off the right side slot from the offense point of view, and the left guard gets murdered. Darnold looks at the slot, the unblocked slot pressure coming at him. For some reason, decides he can ignore that, turn to his left, try and find something, and by the time he turns to his left guard has gotten murdered, and that guy is going to get him. But you can't look at an unblocked pressure like blitzer from the secondary and be like, that's not a problem. I can turn all the way to the other side of the field, hope that there's a receiver open there, and still get rid of the ball. I mean, that's bad decision-making from the quarterback. 4th sack, it's a creative sim pressure, but Darnold is not. They have more numbers on the right side, right? It's a route combination with 3 receivers on that side and only 2 defenders, the shallow of which will be open. And Darnold's not even working that combination. He's looking somewhere else. 5th sack, early pressure. Darnold avoids it, does well, resets in the pocket, and then wanted to go to Justin Jefferson. Jefferson gets cut off, and instead he decides to eat the ball, take the sack. Just put it in the air, overthrow it. There's nobody there. It's open real estate. Get rid of the ball. That's, again, quarterback's got to get rid of that. And then the 6th one, simple stunt, screws up the offensive line. Darnold doesn't really have anyone to go. That's the first one where I think you could say it's avoidable, but it's probably most quarterbacks take a sack on that play. So you get 6 deep before you find one that I think a good quarterback probably would take that sack as well. The first 5, I think a good quarterback / Darnold when he wasn't broken is not taking a sack on that play. So yeah, the Vikings offensive line is not good. The interior in particular is a problem for them and generally is. But when Darnold is playing well, as he played for the first 15 games, 16 weeks of the season, he's able to offset those things. He's able to make good decisions. He's able to get rid of the ball. He's able to work the correct route combination. He's able to recognize the blitz and get rid of the ball before the pressure gets to him. Those are not sacks. The Lions, for some reason, broke Sam Darnold. And in the last 2 weeks, he simply is not that player anymore, and he hasn't been making those decisions. And so you end up in a game like this where the Rams defense did well. Like their front four was winning one-on-one matchups on a reasonably consistent basis, and they did well with creative, sim pressures, all those kinds of things. So those two things worked and were impressive and deserve credit. But you don't get to 9 sacks without the quarterback imploding. Like that doesn't happen without a quarterback making bad decisions from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, that social clip right there, Sam walking through all of Sam Darnold getting sacked. I think it'd be great. I think there's certainly a nuanced discussion to be had, and I saw people talking online, Darren Orlovsky out there, and Kev Cole, former colleague at PFF, discussing when people you started it off by saying a lot of times we think in this binary fashion: is it the QB or is it the offensive line? And again, there's both, right? The offensive line did get whooped. Cam Robinson, double-digit pressures allowed. Brian O'Neill. I mean, these are two good pass protecting tackles. They got whooped, and Jared almost right off the bat. Jared Verse is the poor guy that didn't get a sack, but probably played as well as anybody up front. The very first sack was him bull rushing Cam Robinson into Darnold's lap, and Byron Young comes around and kind of cleans it up. So yeah, the Rams deserve credit, and we'll give them all the proper credit in a second here. Byron Young, 8 pressures. Jared Verse had 7. Braden Fisk had 6. Michael Hoyt and Kobe Turner both had 5. Neville Gallimore had 2. Both of them were sacks. I mean, up and down this defensive line, the Rams came to play. But the nuanced discussion around this is like, do you 100% blame the quarterback and this and that? Like, it's never 100%, but the point you're making is there's always this alternative better play. Did the Vikings pass protection play poorly? Absolutely. Did it wreck the game? Yes, I think it did. But it also could have wrecked the game differently, where Darnold was either, throwing up to Justin Jefferson once in a while,
yes,
right? How many times has he made a contested catch in a terrible situation? Throw the ball away, dirt it, save 7 yards. Those are the types of things we're talking about. The pressure is bad. It's the line's getting beat up, but there's probably an alternative better play. So when we talk about the QB controlling their sack rate, they also control their pressure rate a little bit. But again, instead of 9 sacks, could you have turned that into 3 or 4, thrown the ball away, and given your offense more opportunities to make some plays?
Yeah, there's a play later where there's early pressure again. So the combination, it's never one thing. There's early pressure, but they're also one-on-one on the outside, running. I think it's Jalen Naylor and Addison on the other side. They're running the same mirroring route concepts. But they're running like an out and up, and the safety has moved. Like, it's one-on-one on the outside with a lot of space. Just put it in the air. Like, it might not be caught, but it's pretty safe, and you give your guy a chance to make a play. Instead, Darnold doesn't want to pull that trigger, is too, that sort of cliche of his eyes drop and he's navigating the rush as opposed to trying to find the pass play. Like, he's too focused on what's happening around him instead of, like, understanding – safeties come down. This guy's one-on-one on the outside. There's a lot of space deep on the left sideline. If I just put it out there, A, it's pretty safe, and B, there's a chance my guy makes a play. And, instead of taking a sack or getting myself in trouble here, it could be positive, right? Just a litany of bad decision-making, which, again, this wasn't happening early in the season. Like, a lot of people are the same people that were taking victory laps of Darnold was always good. It was the Jets' fault, right? We're now getting the opposite side of that argument, taking the same victory laps now. He was always terrible. This is just the pumpkin has finally come back. This was always who he was. In reality, Darnold has been a different player for 15 games this season. Yes. 14 games. He was bad in 1 game. He's been a different player up until this point. And then, as I said, something happened in the Lions game that rebooted him, flashed his software, and he's got all the way back to seeing go Sam Darnold, and is not making any of the good decisions that he made. I mean, they kept cutting to Kevin O'Connell on the sideline right after every one of these sacks that is not really on the team. It's on Darnold, and he's like, what? Like, come on. You can't do that.
I've always wondered what exactly happens when you're in a slump, so to speak, as a quarterback, from a vision perspective. I think we've seen Dak go through this at times. Just a couple guys. I mean, everybody's gone through it, but guys that I remember seeing say this about Russ a lot of times. Like, there are some games where Russ just doesn't see it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, first read, it's open, it's right there, and he just doesn't take it. Darnold did that last week. Maybe the most alarming play is when he didn't take a first read slant to Jordan Addison in the red zone last week against the Lions.
Touchdown.
There were other plays that were alarming, right? He missed an open throw and this and that. But why aren't you seeing it? Why aren't you just seeing the field? Like, how does a slump happen from a vision and read the field perspective? I get a throwing slump. I've had that before, right? I get missing throws. I get maybe your footwork's off. But he wasn't seeing it. He's not feeling the game the last couple of weeks.
Well, this is why I think it's a crisis of confidence more than anything else. Like, whatever happened to him a week ago against Detroit shattered his confidence, which apparently, I mean, it makes sense, right? A guy who's, 6 years into his career, the first 5 of which have been pretty terrible. So former top draft pick, you come into the NFL with whatever level of confidence, and then you get beat down by the NFL, the professional leagues, for the first couple of years on a bad team, and your confidence is gone. And so I think a lot of these reclamation project type quarterbacks, it's about taking a guy whose confidence has been absolutely shattered and putting that back together again, because the physical talent is obviously there. That's why you drafted him at the top of the draft in the first place. But I wonder how, can you rebuild something like that and have it as strong as it was in the first place? Or is it always just about ready to break again? This feels like somebody who, like Kevin O'Connell, rebuilt his confidence and nothing had really gone wrong. There weren't a ton of setbacks this season. There were some, and in game in particular, like early setback, but the confidence is still there. He can come back. But something happened to just obliterate that confidence again. And now Darnold has no faith in anything. Like, I think that touchdown pass, should have been touchdown pass to Addison, is the best example of that. Like, 6 weeks ago, Darnold just lets rip into a tight window, touchdown, and that's a different game from that point on. Instead, it's like he doesn't trust it, pulls it down, and ends up going back to Addison later on the play for a significantly more difficult attempt, and they can't come down with it. Like, I feel like his confidence that had been rebuilt this season was just completely shattered again.
We don't have the time today, but we'll have more time in the future to talk about Darnold, his future with the Vikings, what they do, free agency generally. Again, I want to spend a couple minutes just give the Rams proper credit. I thought they came out firing too, by the way.
Yeah.
You talked about, hey, you could kind of tell what a Vikings game looks like in the playoffs. They've had some heartbreaks. They've had some just demoralizing beatdowns on the wrong end of it. I thought this was going to be one of those Stafford games right off the bat where he comes out hot. His second throw is just a downfield seam to Tyler Higbee, who makes a diving catch. It's like, all right, Stafford's on one. He's feeling it. And then, again, the play that talked about Monday night, other people have highlighted, the boot action where they send, 3 receivers to flood the field, pretty common boot action, but then they leak Kyron Williams, the running back, out as a fourth option to the same side of the field. Everybody's saying, man, we don't see this very often. Teams are going to start stealing this. It was a great play, and that was what set up. That was the first touchdown for the Rams. I thought Stafford was hot. The play calling was good, and, of course, what the defense did. The other stat that that needs to be highlighted, remember week 14 against the Bills, they gave up 42 points. Mm-hmm. And they almost let Josh Allen and the Bills come back when they had a big lead. Since that point, the starters have played 4 games, and they've only given up 33 points. Total. Over 4 games, haven't given up more than 10 since that game against the Bills. That was against the 49ers, against the Jets, this game, and one other team. Anyway, very impressive what the Rams defense has done. And Sean McVay had that offense ready to go as well. And maybe they eased up a little bit in the second half where they had that lead. Yeah,
he was really – I mean, they were very impressive. It felt, though, very early on – I wonder about Brian Flores now off the back of this. 2 teams now seem to have diagnosed his defense and cracked the code and repeated the trick.
Well, that's not too – I mean, they gave up 20 points offensively. It was a fumble.
Yeah, but remember how much of that – but like how many of those happened early and then the Rams sort of cooled off. Like the damage was done at that point. But it feels like, I wonder if this defense is very much like, some kind of complicated cipher where it's extremely difficult to crack the code. But once you have the code, you have the code. Like you can read the opposing calls once you have the cipher. And Ben Johnson seems to have had that for a while now. And I think Sean McVay and the Rams have it as well. It was like a repeat of the first game where they just came out, they were quick passing. Stafford's average time to throw in the first quarter was like 2.3 seconds. They were just replacing, right? Vikings blitz, send a player from here. We're going to replace him behind him, throw the ball. They knew the answers. And then, eventually. But also, the Rams lost Tyler Higbee, who was a big part of that. So it's not that the Vikings defense is absent teeth. It's just that they're no longer – their biggest weapon is disguise and confusion. And if you have the code, you're no longer confused by the disguise. You know what they're doing. And yeah, they still have players that can make plays. You know, guys like Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard, these are still imposing threats that you have to counter, but you're no longer surprised by what they're doing. You no longer, that game that he had, remember a year ago against Brock Purdy, where Purdy was just throwing the ball to Josh Metellus because he's like, what, that guy's not supposed to be there. Just surprised, right? That's no longer on the table. Like you no longer have that capacity to just shock Matthew Stafford because he knows what you're doing. I do wonder if that's what that defense is like, that eventually teams figure out the cipher and you take away 50% of what they bring to the table. And that's two teams this year that have been able to do that. Part of me was really curious, like if the Vikings had beaten the Rams and gotten through to the Lions again.
How'd they play the Lions?
Yeah, like do they change it? Because the other thing about this is Flores does not change it up. It's like, this is what we're doing. And if somebody is like, okay, but I have the answers to that, it's probably not good for you. He's like, don't care, going to keep going. And the Rams, I mean, Jordan Rodriguez made this point as well. The Rams are the type of team, Sean McVay, if they find something that works, they're not just going to like hit you with that and then do something else and then come back and hit you with that again. They're going to keep hitting you with that punch until you stop it, right? So if they found like a solution to this defense, they're just going to spam it until you figure out something else. And Flores doesn't change. So consequently, the Rams just sit there and jab at you until, you know, you have the Rocky face and the puffed eyes and you're like, cut me, Mick. That's the only thing left. And you're done.
You're special today. Appreciate you. We got to get to Matt Harmon. So plenty to talk about as far as the Darnold's future, the Vikings' future. Rams are going to go to the Eagles tomorrow. We'll talk about that. We're going to be previewing every game tomorrow on our preview show, Rams-Eagles, Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock. First, got to tell you about our friends over at Orgain. Just joining the show this week, especially when it comes to protein and good stuff. Like to know what I'm putting into my body. So we're excited to be sponsored by Orgain. Love the vanilla shake, Sam. Just had that. Knocked out a workout just to make sure that I could have some of this.
You're a vanilla guy?
It's inspiring me to work out more,
I thought the
more
chocolate was better than the vanilla. I like the chocolate. Chocolate tastes a lot like chocolate milk.
I'll get to the chocolate today. How about that?
Okay.
And but the vanilla was fantastic for me. You know, I like both flavors. So appreciate Orgain, and would have loved to have this when I was playing, to be honest. 30 grams of protein, no added sugar.
You might have got drafted then.
I might have gotten drafted and not passed over 1,500 times if I had Orgain back then. A beautiful protein like that. So, look, I've tried a lot of protein through the years. This is as good as it gets. So appreciate Orgain. And they're easy little travel packs too. So when we hit the road for the Senior Bowl, the Super Bowl, and everything, we can take these with us, post-workout, have it nice and convenient there. So remember, there's no quick fixes when it comes to your health. If you want more protein, give Orgain's 30-gram protein shakes a try. Head to Orgain.com/checkthemic and use code checkthemic for 30% off your order. That's the best offer you'll find, and you have to use the code checkthemic for 30% off. One last time for 30% off. Head to Orgain.com/checkthemic. Use the code checkthemic. All right, let's get our friend Matt Harmon in here. We didn't get to get the Shouty Show clip. I think he would love that. Hey, Matt, how's it going, man?
I mean, I'm going to struggle to follow up that ad read, Steve. That was incredible stuff. But hey, we're talking protein. We're talking wide receivers. I'm here for that. What's going on, boys?
Nice.
How we doing? Matt Harmon of Reception Perception fame and over at Yahoo. One of the, I always appreciate your opinions when it comes to wide receivers. I know we've got some pre-draft rankings and various things like that. But tell everybody what you tend to do when you look at receivers, just as a little background.
Sure. So reception perception is the methodology that I came up with to evaluate wide receivers. It's been about 10, 11 years now. So we've got a full database of not just prospects, but also NFL players. So can track some of those guys really from that 2014 class. I've got a lot of those guys throughout the course of their careers. So the last 10 plus years, I've been charting wide receivers for reception perception. So what I do is over an 8-game sample for NFL players and prospects when that much film is available to me. I go in and I chart every single route that they run, every single snap that they take. I really focus on roles specifically to these guys as well. You know, how often are they lining up off the line of scrimmage? How often are they moving around pre-snap? Where do you line up in the slot? Left, right, wide receiver, X, flanker, everything kind of trickles down from there. But the main metrics that people love is the success rate versus coverage metrics, which is how often do you get open on each individual route type? How often are you running each route type? What's your success rate versus man, zone, press? The idea behind reception perception, because obviously you guys and all of your smart listeners know this, wide receiver production is so inherently dependent on surroundings and circumstances. Even the great stats that we all really like a yards per route run, you play with a bunch of good players, you're not going to get as many targets maybe as your talent might necessarily recommend. Or if you have bad quarterback play, that's going to impact you in a statistical result. So the goal of reception perception these last 10 plus years has been to try to isolate wide receivers from surrounding variables as much as possible. So I love the work. I love learning about players every single year, and it's a blast.
So you haven't gotten into this year's draft class yet, I know that, but maybe in the future, if this goes well, Matt, we'll have you back. Maybe,
Okay.
We'll talk,
no pressure.
We'll talk about the draft prospects and everything, but I definitely wanted to talk about the rookies. It was supposed to be a very deep class. We thought it was maybe top heavy with the top three. What were your thoughts on the wide receiver class coming into the season? Then we'll get into what we saw from these guys as rookies.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good class. I agreed with that notion. I also thought there was a tier one to me, which I said all through draft season, it really kind of depends on your flavor. It really kind of depends on what you're looking for from your wide receiver one, how you were going to stack Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, and Malik Nabers. But they were all clear-cut top 10 prospects to me. I think they can play multiple positions. Now, obviously, we'll talk about what they did in the NFL, but that was the pre-draft thought there was I think all those guys were great prospects. They were tier one guys, and you could take them in the top 10 and feel pretty good about them playing and making an impact early. All those guys did play and made varying degrees of impact early. The next crop of guys I thought was a little, I wouldn't say it was overhyped, but I thought the only clear round one player, and a lot of guys did go in round one, but the only other clear round one player from a full profile perspective was Brian Thomas Jr., who, spoiler alert, I think actually played the best of any of these guys in year number one. So we'll certainly unpack that. And then there was a lot of guys I think that sort of filtered into that late round one, early round two range. Your Lad McConkeys, your Ricky Pearsalls, and then a few other guys too that we can dive into as well. But I thought it was a really good class. I thought a lot of these guys would make a year one impact, and we did see, again, to varying degrees, a lot of players get on the field early and make some level of an impact.
Just to make sure we could properly call you out, did you have pre-draft rankings for us to unveil here just to see how right and wrong you were?
Yeah, so for me, pre-draft, I went Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Malik Nabers. I had Jermaine Burton as a first-round talent, but everybody knew the deal that he was not going to go in the first round. I'm honestly surprised he went in the third round, to be frank. I thought he might slip potentially all the way out of the draft, and let's just say that experience as a rookie season has not gone particularly well. Brian Thomas Jr. then was the clear-cut number 4, and then it was Ricky Pearsall, Lad McConkey, Adonai Mitchell, and then I think there's a teardrop to your Xavier Worthies. Probably the most disappointing wide receiver this year for me was Jalen Polk. I did have him right around in that range, and then like your Keon Colemans, Troy Franklin, Xavier Legette, that kind of rounds out the top 10-ish, 15-ish.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, I had Jermaine Burton as wide receiver 4, talent alone. We knew all the reports about off-field and issues, and no one would say a nice word about him. I'll take the blame, though. He's my neighbor down the street, lives probably 5 minutes from me.
It's really your fault.
Haven't kept an eye on him.
Right.
We
knew we needed
What are you doing?
Him.
Plus, we hugged it out during preseason camp and everything and said hello, and I thought that might help spark him to a good season.
It was clear he needed some kind of minder, and you're literally on location, and you haven't been able to mind him.
So I failed keeping an eye on Jermaine here.
Yeah. We're reaching this point where after the season, obviously we can start doing some retrospective victory laps and or criticism, right? So I've seen recently a lot of people saying the problem was everybody got into this groupthink narrative. We're all idiots, and Marvin Harrison Jr. was always a fraud, right? And Chris Sims was the only man with integrity to be out there saying this guy doesn't have it. Brian Thomas is amazing. Malik Nabers is amazing. Marvin Harrison's just a chump, right? I may be putting words into Chris's mouth. I don't know if he actually went that far.
He just called him wide receiver 3.
Exactly.
That's all.
He had him behind those two guys, and everybody's now saying, see, all the draft community, it's fraudulent crap. We got into groupthink. Marvin Harrison was never good. What do you think? Number one, how good was he in his rookie season? And number two, did we all get into groupthink and just get carried away and not actually fairly analyze Marvin Harrison Jr., and he was never quite as good as people thought he was?
Well, let's first just say, to me, and this is just my opinion, anytime we're tagging a prospect as generational or, once in a this, that, and the other, I already think we're getting into troublesome territory, because even if I had Harrison as the top ranked receiver in this class, I didn't think he was a flawless prospect. I actually wrote in his prospect profile and reception perception that I thought he had issues, and I called them, to be fair, I'm not trying to take a victory lap on this, I called them minor issues at the catch point. Turns out they were not minor issues. That was actually a huge problem for him as a rookie. I think he really struggled working back to the ball. I think he struggled attacking the ball in tight coverage. And that evidence was on his college film, and it did become worse in the NFL. Now, I don't think that that's something that he can't improve on. I think that's actually something he can track and get better at over the course of his career. But for now, that's the biggest negative in what we saw at his rookie season. Otherwise, I thought he was I would categorize his early RP metrics as sort of like a solid starter. I think that's kind of what he looked like this year. I do think that there was also other issues for him as a rookie. I think the role early on was very narrow. It was very focused on kind of what I would call like sacrificial X receiver duties, like just line up on the line of scrimmage as the farthest outside player and run a lot of vertical routes and not a lot of these horizontal breaking patterns that he was really good at in college. I think it took them a minute to maybe figure out what the right usage was for him. I think over the course of the season, he did start running more crossers, more out-breaking routes, and those were really where we saw him make the best plays. I also think that, I don't know where you guys are at on Kyler Murray. I think I know what he is. I don't think he's necessarily a player who's going to elevate a great wide receiver or anything like that. I think he's just, again, probably reasonable starting quarterback level of play. So there's a lot of things going on with him as a rookie, but there's no question that he does have to own some of the issues that we saw for him as a rookie. Not a perfect player as a prospect, and definitely not a perfect player. Slightly disappointing rookie season is what I'd categorize it as.
Yeah, he and Kyler just seem to be off quite a bit, especially on anything back shoulder related, timing, and they just never seem to be on the same page. Last thing on Harrison, though, people liked Malik Nabers in particular because he just looked dynamic and fast and explosive. Marvin Harrison Jr., of course, never worked out. And the very first week, he didn't run fast. In week one, everybody's like, oh, he's slow. Yeah. What do you see from his speed, explosiveness, athleticism, especially maybe compared to some of these other guys?
Yeah, this is why I struggled with calling him, again, even if I had him as a top-ranked receiver in the class, I struggled calling him, like a generational prospect or anything, because I think the best parts of his game, and this isn't surprising, guys, like his dad is Marvin Harrison Sr., an excellent technician. I thought the best parts of his game were like the savviness of his approach to running routes, to setting up breaks. Like I thought he looked like an NFL veteran running routes at the college level, but I wouldn't say that he was an overwhelming physical specimen at the collegiate level, and I certainly don't think he was that in the NFL. Like I think he's not like a below a threshold or anything like that. I think he's, again, probably fine with what you'd want from a number one receiver. He has to just maximize other areas of his game. It's also hard to say like who is he as a yak threat, because for the in-season rookie report at reception perception, I charted in space attempts. I got almost nothing from him. They don't use him in that way. Is that because he's not dynamic as a mover? Potentially, but you also just don't see that in the role that he played as a rookie. It's hard to gauge that.
Yeah, I actually, not his final year in college, the year before that, I thought his sort of short area explosiveness, the underneath stuff and the lateral cuts in particular, were kind of weak. Like it actually felt like a problem to me. And then I thought his final season was much better, because we were doing, this sort of pre-draft stuff, and Trevor Sikkema had told me about this guy. He was obviously the next guy coming along at Ohio State. And I watched that tape, and I was like, you can see that he's that big. Like the lateral stuff is not as explosive and not as quick and dynamic as you want for a guy that's supposed to be that good. And then I thought in that final season, most of that went away, and it was no longer a concern. But maybe it is. Like he's at that size, he just doesn't have that explosiveness and short area, dynamism that you want from an elite receiver, and that a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., who's also big, does have.
Yeah. No question. I mean, the difference between those two guys is you can feel it, and maybe wasn't as apparent in college, but it's certainly when you stack them up in the NFL, it is apparent.
What are your thoughts on Malik Nabers? Again, it was not rare for people to have Malik Nabers over Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, the reports coming out of NFL teams that probably half the NFL teams actually had Nabers over Harrison. So generational or not, people were on to Malik Nabers as a prospect. What'd you see with him as a prospect and then as a rookie?
Yeah, he's the best yards after catch prospect that I've charted in the, however long we've been doing the prospect database. He's a blast to watch in college. He's dynamic in the open field. Like he is not somebody where you've got to search and scrape to find the dynamic plays in the open field. They were readily apparent over his collegiate tape. I thought he was also awesome against man coverage, particularly. He played about 50-50 slot outside in the games that I charted, but when you saw him go up against outside cornerbacks, I never thought he had a lot of issues there. The only real, I wouldn't even call this a concern, but the one thing I kind of got stuck up with him was I thought there were times where he struggled like working back to the ball and settling in zone coverage. And I think there was some of that early on over the course of his rookie season. That's like maybe the one thing I think he's got to work on is timing wise, being in the right spots. And like I said, settling at the right depth and things like that and presenting a layup target in the intermediate area of the field specifically against zone coverage, but that's a very minor note. And he checks a lot of other boxes. Very early on in his rookie season, I thought he would probably be the best player in this class. I think there's a couple other guys that over the course of the year maybe caught up to him. But man, he is an easy player to like both as a prospect and certainly at the NFL level. He's great for these modern offenses too that want to create layup touches for their quarterback and want to create yards after catch opportunities. Somebody that can play all three positions, in my opinion. I think you can line him up at X and you can trust him to run downfield routes against press coverage. You can also move him around into the slot and, again, give your quarterback some designed opportunities and easy completions. So that type of ability is very appealing to coordinators or head coaches that are play callers that want to grow a young quarterback, which certainly the New York Giants are probably going to want to do this year.
I thought this most recent draft class of receivers was a really interesting group of like unusual style wide receivers. Like you had those top guys who were in part such a tier by themselves because they all fit neatly into that number one prototypical type of bucket. And then you had a bunch of guys that were very unusual styles or sizes or, different skill sets. One of the most difficult to peg for me was Keon Coleman, who there was so many red flags with his prospect profile, and yet I wanted to like him anyway. And I could never quite figure it out. And then you, I think, did a really good job of articulating why there are still reasons to like Keon Coleman as a prospect. And then the Bills were the team that drafted him. And immediately you're like, that feels like a terrible fit because they just traded away Stephon Diggs. They need an X receiver replacement. That's not what Keon Coleman brings to the table. They announced almost immediately that's exactly what they plan on doing with him. So what did you think of Keon Coleman? How did you like the fit in Buffalo? And how do you think that's worked so far in year one?
Yeah, when you look at his prospect profile, I did a whole breakdown of this on YouTube, where that he fits into the bucket of players that struggle to beat press man coverage in reception perception as prospects. They're like at or below the 35th percentile. All of those players that ended up working out in the NFL moved in to be big slot receivers. We're talking about like Juju Smith-Schuster. We're talking about Rashee Rice. We're talking about a lot of players in that, even like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, another guy that moved into the slot that you could see that in his college film. Like, I think he has the movement skills and the type of toughness that you'd want and the savviness to work against zone coverage, even if he at USC at times worked as an outside receiver, to make that transition into that power slot type of receiver. I thought Coleman checked a lot of those boxes, not to mention and you saw this in spurts in the NFL on kind of broken plays and things like that. He's a big-time mover in the open field. Whether he's the fastest guy in the world, he is flexible. I think he sets up yards after catch opportunities well, and he's just a load to bring down because he's massive. To me, if I want that player to become a high volume player, I'd want him to move into that slot. Obviously, that's not what the Bills did. 11% of his snaps as a rookie came in the slot in the regular season. They don't share that vision, which also is a little bit understandable because their best pass catcher is Khalil Shakir, who's a great player, and he is certainly a guy that you want to play in that slot receiver spot. So I understand they're looking for more of a physical, bigger presence on the outside. to me, he's always going to struggle to separate out there. And like, he's a ball winner. I think he actually developed really a good sixth sense to work with Josh Allen on scramble plays. I think he'll be better than Gabe Davis in the long term, but that's what Gabe Davis was pretty decent at for the Buffalo Bills as a role player, was how do I uncover? He learned that over time. How do I uncover when my quarterback is back there moving around? I think Coleman developed that sense over the course of the season. That's good to see. But to me, I do think you're always putting kind of a hard ceiling on him as a splash big play threat guy, as opposed to a high volume pass catcher if you're going to use him outside.
All right, Matt, we all have our own hits and misses, but before the draft, you mentioned, hey, there was a fourth first-round player, Brian Thomas Jr. That seemed to be the consensus. Sam and I were lower on Brian Thomas Jr. We were a little bit lower on Zay Flowers. Now, I highlighted Puka Nacua the year before, so we'll take that victory lap, but was too low on Brian Thomas Jr. How surprised were you at how well he played? How well did he play? What else did you see from Brian Thomas Jr. as a rookie?
Yeah, I thought that his final season at college actually maps pretty well to his rookie season, and that I think you saw consistent improvement over the course of the season. To me, when I highlighted this in his prospect profile, I thought the routes in December and later in the season were a lot better than the routes at the beginning of the season, and that growth was something that mixed with all the athletic traits and what I thought was pretty good ability off the line of scrimmage. That was what really made me like Brian Thomas, and I kind of called him the actualized version of these prospects like Christian Watson or Quentin Johnston. You know, to me, I always think there's at least one prospect in a class that everybody's chasing the Martavis Bryant kind of outcomes,
yes.
And obviously Bryant had off-field issues.
I'm chasing that at all times, Matt. I want that guy. Big, fast, strong, 20 yards per catch. Want that in my offense.
100%. Who doesn't? And I think that a lot of these guys like Watson and Johnson, to again, varying degrees of success, were sort of trying to chase that archetype of player. I'm also like you, Steven, that I want to find that player as well. To me, I thought Thomas was the actualized version of that type of player. But I would say that even that description I just gave of him, like he outkicked that as a rookie, and especially later in the season. And look, I realize, and I think this is important to bring up. People hate when you bring this up because it sounds like you're trying to discredit Brian Thomas Jr., but he did thrive at the end of the season from a volume perspective because Christian Kirk is out, Evan Ingram is out, Gabe Davis is out, but I think the Jaguars coaching staff probably a little too late got to the point where we're just going to make Brian Thomas the first read of every concept, and we're going to use him in multiple ways. And the fact that he responded to that, I think, shows you that growth trajectory that really in December and late in the season this year, I think he was much, much better as a rookie than he was as an early rookie player, where you saw him work very well against press man coverage, particularly I would say in the intermediate and downfield areas. The more and more we got of him as a rookie, I think he worked better against zone coverage. He consistently uncovered and made himself a reliable target. You don't get 30% of your team's passing targets by accident. And Brian Thomas Jr., I think, certainly had earned that promotion long before he really even got it. I think he's a great player. I think he probably has to be considered the best rookie of the bunch with the way he played late in the year. And that dynamic ability, you want to hope that he can only get better and better as he continues to hone the craftsman part of the game.
Yeah, he had a phenomenal rookie season. As you said, I think he's the best of the group. And I also think he was held back by everything else around him, other than the fact that he saw an uptick in volume by guys getting down injured. But I don't think Trevor Lawrence or Mac Jones tapped into what he could do to the fullest extent. I also don't think the Jags were as quick as they could have been to fully expand that role and take advantage of what he could do. Honestly, the sky is the limit for him in my eyes. And I didn't like him as a prospect. I did not see this was within his range of outcomes, but I felt it was a very low chance he would actually do this. And yet he's absolutely cooking. I was curious, though, that idea of receiver, quarterback not quite being on the same page. We talked about it with Marvin Harrison and Kyler Murray. Talked about it a little bit with Brian Thomas Jr. I've never seen it be worse, though, than with Adonai Mitchell and any quarterback. Why could neither of the Colts quarterbacks put the ball anywhere near Adonai Mitchell all season long?
Yeah, and he is definitely a tough one to evaluate after his rookie season because there are really high moments and, routes. I think he particularly, like, if you look at the in-season reception perception rookie report, there's some routes and really some boxes that he checks that are very strong, particularly, working off the line of scrimmage in just ISO press man coverage. I thought that he was really good in those areas. I also think he was inconsistent in some spots too. So some of it is player owned as well, some of these struggles with him, but man, he's a really good separator, particularly against man coverage, especially on like slant routes and curl routes. But it felt like a little bit to me, Sam, that the Colts almost didn't quite know what they wanted to do with him. Like, I know for a fact they were very high on him as a prospect, and then they got higher on him when they got him into camp and like into the building. They were even more impressed. And then I think when Josh Downs went down with an injury after having a great training camp, they immediately wanted to think like, okay, how can we get Adonai Mitchell on the field? Why don't we put him sort of in some of these slot receiver packages, even though we were probably developing him as a long-term X receiver, which to me I do think is his best fit long-term. I think he probably is a perimeter X receiver that should work in those areas of the field, vertical routes, again, try to get him against press, particularly like make him the first read on some of these concepts, things like that. I think he would thrive in that area, but I think they wanted to get him on the field. And to me, I think early on, you could kind of see his head spinning in ways where he's making like small mistakes, things like that. I think obviously the quarterback play was consistently making mistakes no matter who it was in Indianapolis this year. So I think those sort of issues compounded on themselves, but he's definitely a player that I think I want to continue to bet on, even if he had drop issues, even if he had some issues, like again, with timing and things like that. He's a little bit like a Dontavian Wicks type of player where I actually had one of my subscribers joke that, has anybody ever seen these two guys in the same room? And I thought that was a relatively decent comparison. Like two guys that could separate and win, but maybe have been mistake prone over the course of their NFL careers. Obviously, Wicks has another year on Mitchell, but I want to continue to bet on a player like that to hopefully get it together, because I do think the separation is something you want to kind of bet on. Is
Mitchell the kind of player that breaks your numbers? Like, he's always open, but he's probably running at different depth. Like, he's just doing his own thing, but maybe he's getting open, and that's why the timing's always off.
I think those guys are usually expressed, and I call them like the Jerry Jeudy type players, where you see them very high, like in a success rate versus man. Again, Mitchell profiles this way after his rookie season, very high like in success rate versus man, but pretty low in success rate versus zone, which I'm usually like, those are the inconsistent type guys that are, they're when you get them in an isolated situation and they're just trying to beat the player across from them, they usually do show up really well in that regard. And I think Jeudy was that way as well, particularly in Denver this past year. I think a little bit different, but you also have to then kind of lean into those guys' strengths and work on it from a deployment perspective from them as well. I don't think that Mitchell and Jeudy are like comparable players, but sort of using that as a way to sort of make that point that you just did, which is these guys that they do separate really well, but they're not always where the quarterback wants them to be, and they don't always really settle in the right areas from a zone coverage standpoint. So hopefully that's something that he can work on over the course of the next few years.
That description sounds to me to be exactly the same as, remember, Stevie Johnson from Buffalo.
I knew that was coming. I knew Stevie Johnson was coming. Yeah.
Stevie Johnson was not a phenomenal wide receiver, but literally nobody in his entire career gave Darrelle Revis more trouble than Stevie Johnson, because you could not predict what he was going to do. You could not read where he was going to go because he was making it up on the fly. It wasn't a route. It was just what Stevie Johnson was doing to get open, and most quarterbacks can't work with that. And then eventually you teamed him up with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was the one guy that was willing to just roll with it and say, all right, I'm just going to wait until Stevie's open and fire the ball at him. And that's when those two cooked. And Stevie Johnson was barbecuing like peak Darrelle Revis at the peak of his powers. Like, do we just need Anthony Richardson to say, just wait until AD's open? Like, just wait until he's open, then hit him with the football. The only problem is, I don't think Anthony Richardson can like reliably hit him with the football, even when he is open.
Oh boy.
Yeah, there's that. And also, this is an issue, I think, in this room and several other rooms. There's a lot of players that command the football in Indianapolis. Like, I think Josh Downs is fantastic. I think Michael Pittman's a rock-solid player as well. And, like, Alec Pierce led that team in receiving yards this year, which I would certainly not have predicted at the beginning of the season. And he did it on, like, sub-40 catches or something like that. So, bizarre season for the Colts wide receiver room. But there are a lot of, like I said, a lot of other guys that you want to get the ball to. Again, I could not be higher on Josh Downs. He was a prospect I really liked. I think he's been fantastic in the NFL when he's been on the field. So Mitchell runs into that problem as well. And you're so right to point this out, Sam, that one thing I've learned about wide receiver play over the course of doing reception perception is like your fit with the quarterback really, really matters. And like you might not be maximized by certain quarterbacks, even if both of the players are good, and I think that I remember a conversation I had with Josh Allen, like about Stephon Diggs, where he had the same dynamic with Diggs when they were cooking together. He's like, he would tell Diggs, I don't care if this is supposed to be an 8-yard route or a 7-yard route or anything like that. That does not matter to me. Just get open and I'm going to find you. The thing is, though, those guys had years of chemistry baked in. There's also years of credibility between the two of them baked in, where that needed to grow and that needed to develop. Like the connection there took some time. And obviously, you're breaking in two guys who have issues in their game and their young players in Adonai Mitchell and Anthony Richardson. That's really difficult, especially when that Buffalo offense, there's one guy we're trying to work the football to. This one particularly not that way. There's a lot of good players there in Indianapolis, like I said. So that also kind of hurts that connection and that credibility being built up. So yeah, fit with your quarterback absolutely matters. Amon-Ra St. Brown, great player, perfectly fits with this quarterback. So that certainly matters with the young players and like how they can develop and get that chemistry going over time.
Matt, before we get to your rookie rankings, after year one, you got to ask about a couple Georgia Bulldogs. Brock Bowers, do you look at tight ends, first of all, and Brock Bowers, and then Ladd McConkey and what you thought about Ladd and what he's done?
So I don't look at tight ends, and there's a two-pronged reason for why I don't. Number one, the non-smart guy reason is there's enough receivers out there. I got enough work on my plate. I'm trying to remain a happily married man,
Understood.
and if we add tight ends on this thing, it's all over for the marriage. Number two, the more educated reason, like I said, I've been doing receivers for 10 plus years now. There's a database. Like I understand what almost basically every metric is telling us. You do the tight end position, you're starting all over from square one. Even if the positions have been blended, guys like Brock Bowers maybe breaking the mold a little bit more than when I started doing receivers in 2014, 2013. Still, just like I said, mostly a time management issue. So no pass catchers, although nothing but good things to say about Brock Bowers there. For Ladd McConkey, I mean, awesome rookie. For long parts of the season, I thought he had the best film of any rookie wide receiver, and you could see it very early that he just checked so many different boxes. And I thought this, I don't know if you guys agreed with this, but I certainly thought when you saw him as a collegiate player, almost everything in his prospect profile was, hey, this is not your typical bunny hop slot receiver. This is a guy who wins big boy downfield routes against man coverage. I thought he was like the best out route runner of the class this past year. Dynamic player against man coverage, works pretty well in the intermediate area, and he can also make contested catches, and he is a chore to bring down in the open field. And you saw all that very early on in his rookie season, and you certainly saw it in the most recent Chargers playoff loss. That's going to go down as one of the better wide receiver performances in a team loss ever, and particularly in the ways that I think were so impressive and really drew Justin Herbert to him early on. Again, quarterback and wide receiver fit really mattering here. Herbert, and he's talked about this, loves the way Ladd McConkey works back to the ball and settles in zone coverage. Like, okay, this guy, we got a zone here in the middle of the field. He's always going to present his numbers on curl routes. He's going to cross guys' faces on dig routes and in breaking patterns. So that trust built up very early on with them. You saw that again very early on in his rookie season. But again, the dynamism is also there, even if it comes in, a smaller package of a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. or a guy like Malik Nabers. He can make those plays in the open field. Again, great, reliable player. I would not be surprised if he ends up being the best rookie long-term from this class. I'm very, very high on what I saw from him as a rookie.
It's like they drafted the complete opposite of Quentin Johnston.
Yeah.
As far as QB friendly, size, the way they move, everything. I watched like 2 routes from Ladd McConkey. So it was 2 routes from Jermaine Burton that made me start texting people. This guy's incredible. And then same thing with Ladd McConkey. Watching him, I'm just like, oh, he's got that speed plus quickness. You don't get a whole lot of both of those, right? Like this guy's straight line fast and has the quickness to get in and out of breaks. I feel like you could almost see that immediately. Again, before the ranking, do you
I'm sure the the replies were a little bit different between the two players as well. That was also my experience.
Yeah. What's up with Jermaine Burton? Nobody. He's off of 3/4 of the draft boards right now, so we'll see what happens. Do you ever just watch like because this happened with us at PFF, like we would pride ourselves on every play and analysis of every play, but sometimes you just like watch 2 or 3 plays and be like, oh, this guy's got it. You ever have those experiences as a data centric guy?
100%. Yeah, you guys would definitely understand this, that for reception perception, it's an 8-game sample. It's always an 8-game sample unless they, don't play over the course of the season. Then I'll give you like a little micro look at what they did. And there are definitely some times where, I probably don't need that 8-game sample, but I really feel like I'm going to enjoy charting the rest of the games. Other times, maybe after 2 games or something, I never want to be totally unfair to a player, but maybe after a couple games, like, God, I gotta get 6 more of these bad boys in here. So yeah, I totally understand that.
The one of the things that was fun at PFF was, like you mentioned earlier, when you start having a complete data set on players and you've basically seen their entire career, and then once you have a certain volume of information, you start to actually learn what any of it means, identifying these trends. On a big picture level, what are some of the things you've kind of learned from all the work that you do?
Yeah, for one, I do think that starting with where a player lines up and where they're deployed it just everything should trickle down from there. It's so difficult to compare guys that, let's take that Amon-Ra St. Brown example, and like what he does is so very different than what a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. was asked to do as a rookie. And I think almost this is what we have to do. They play the same position, but they almost don't even really play the same position. So that's number one. And then also certain things matter. If you're going to be that power slot player, I care a lot more about your success rate versus zone coverage or your ability to work after the catch. That matters more to me than if you're going to be that perimeter X receiver. The other thing that I've learned to just kind of throw my hands up about and to not pretend like I have all the answers is wide receiver age curves. Like I think this stuff that I have made the biggest mistakes on over the course of my career is trying to pinpoint when guys are going to fall off to the point that I just don't even really try to do it. Like it can be expressed in the numbers and in the reception perception data. Like this guy has taken a step back from 2023 to 2024 or 2022 to 2023, whatever. But what happens next is almost completely impossible to predict because there's degrees of fall offs. A great example is like Keenan Allen. He is definitely over his last 2 seasons in LA, not the same player. And I know he said when he was traded, like, I'm coming off my best year. He might be coming off one of his most productive years, but he's not the same player as his peak version. But he's still a useful player, even if he's going down 10%, 5%, whatever, like over the course of seasons. Then there are other examples. You see a guy like Dez Bryant, his final year with the Dallas Cowboys. It was just over. And it happened very fast. A guy I've always been a big fan of, Allen Robinson, another great example that when it was over, it was over. And he's still hanging on to rosters. Let's go get him a Super Bowl win in Detroit for all of us longtime Allen Robinson fans. Yes. That's great. But he just was never going to recapture that same form. So that is one thing I've learned. Like, if you're ever seeing, somebody out there saying, hey, this wide receiver's, it's over, we're trying to pinpoint, like, be cautious, because I do think that there are really no rules to wide receiver decline.
Randy Moss was the example we always use too.
Yeah.
He went from legit Randy Moss type player to like, dude can't do anything. Just bouncing around the league.
That was the one that was shocking to me because I always felt that Moss's skill set would age really well. Like even if he lost all of his speed whatsoever, you still had one of the most amazing jump ball red zone threats of all time. But when he lost it, he lost like the ability to catch the football. He was dropping, his drop rate went through the roof. It's like Randy Moss went from best receiver of all time at his peak to the dude can't cling onto a roster spot anymore. And legitimately.
All right, Matt, we'll let you go at some point here, but
at some point,
how would you rank these guys? We need some rankings, for social media here. So we're going to put this out there so people can attack you, either positively or negatively, either compliment you or attack you. That's how we do it here. So what's your top 5 coming out of year 1 here for these rookies?
Top 5, I would go with Brian Thomas. Number 1, I would go with Ladd McConkey. Number 2, I would go with Malik Nabers. Number 3, I do think there's a drop off then after that. I'm still probably based on what I saw in their rookie seasons. And, obviously you still got to default a little bit to some of your pre-draft stuff. I do think Marvin Harrison Jr. is number 4 for me. The 5th spot is a little bit wide open, honestly. But I'm actually still very enthusiastic about Rome Odunze's future. I would probably put him number 5 in the rankings there. And I really don't think anybody consistently stepped up to kind of take that 5th spot there. And he is certainly never going to look good in any sort of advanced metric, right? Like yards per route run. Well, again, let's remember he did not have consistently good. I'm not saying Caleb Williams is going to be bad over the course of his career, but he certainly was not a consistently good quarterback over the course of his rookie season. And he also is splitting, opportunities with 2 proven veterans in DJ Moore and obviously Keenan Allen, who we just talked about. None of the other rookies can really say that. I still think he's a guy that has multi-positional versatility. I think he could probably play as an X receiver, similar to actually in a vein of Allen Robinson. I think there's some comparisons there. But, my co-host at Yahoo for Football 301, Nate Tice, actually thinks he's a perfect power slot receiver, like a guy that could play that in that way too. I'm interested in it potentially in both ways. So I really was a big fan of Rome Odunze as a prospect, and I'm still very high on him going into his 2nd season. So he would probably round out my top 5. The sleeper that I feel like I got to give out here, who probably wouldn't be wide receiver 6, but Panthers undrafted wide receiver Jalen Coker. That guy can play, and it was very apparent early on. He has this might not put butts in seats making this comparison, but he's got a lot of similar RP metrics to a guy like Jacoby Myers, who I think is one of the more underrated receivers in the league. Rock solid guy that could play as a slot, can play a little bit outside. I'm very interested to see what his future is. I think they got a nice little hit there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Jacoby Myers is a dependable number 2 receiver, 2.5 receiver, whatever you want to call him. Like if you have an alpha 1 and it's like, okay, Myers is going to get you 8 or 9 catches in a game when it calls for it. It's a great comp. That's good for the Panthers and a find in Jalen Coker.
Yeah.
Tell everybody where you could where they could find all this stuff, and then how many prospects are you going to be able to get through? When can we have you back to talk about this draft class?
Yeah, receptionperception.com is where you're going to find this. Every offseason, I kind of follow a similar schedule where I do the free agents first, and then it's prospects. Usually those start dropping. Last year, I did it like late March, early April. That is probably the target as well. Last year, I got to, I think, about 22 to 25 prospects, somewhere in that range. I've heard this is not as good of a class, which, maybe will be better for the workload. We'll see. But I'm going to hope to hit around 20 again this year.
That's the endless frustration, right? Is that there's always too many players. You can be 20, 25 deep, and then you're still barely giving a guy like Jalen Coker a look, and he's the guy that after the season you're like, man, I barely even watched that guy. It's crazy. There's always too many players at every position.
Yeah, it's probably not as deep, but nobody got to Puka a couple of years ago, right? Not enough people got to Puka, I'm sure. So, yeah.
There was a Puka reception perception profile. He was probably the best of the guys that I thought was going to go on day 3. So I will join you, Steve, in the micro Puka victory lap there.
Beautiful. I love it, Matt. Appreciate it. Well, you do great work, Matt. It was great having you on the show. Appreciate having you. So go check out Reception Perception and all the work that you say hi to Nate. All the work you guys do over at Yahoo. Say hi to Nate for us. But appreciate having you, Matt. We'll have you back soon.
Appreciate you guys for having me. Yeah, hopefully I didn't blow this one. And please, Steve, keep an eye on Jermaine for us. Maybe we can get him on the straight and narrow by the time the season. Probably
stop by his house later today. Check on him here.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right, thanks,
Take it
Matt.
easy, Matt.
Matt Harmon, Reception Perception, Yahoo Sports. Does great work, and it's funny because I remember when he started that about 10 years ago. Charting wide receivers and everything, and there is a lot of data now, right? And you could start telling stories about that. Again, what we went through at PFF when you have only a handful of years of data. I think the same thing he said. It's like, oh, I made this call based off this data, and then you found out that's not the way to look at it. There's other data points to look at, and when you have 10 years, some valuable information in there.
Yeah, it's cool. Like that's one of the sort of fun parts of this is when you start getting that wealth of data and learning little bits and pieces that you didn't know or didn't appreciate from sort of previous information available. It's a cool element of all that.
All right, we're going to get to Shouty Shows in a minute, but I got to tell you about our friends over at Rocket Money. Top priority for me, financial wellness, which feels more important than ever thanks to Rocket Money. My goals feel achievable. They show me all of my subscriptions right in one place. help me easily cancel the ones that I forgot I'm even paying for. In fact, I just learned that 85% of people have at least one paid subscription going unused each month. So Rocket Money pulls together all your spending into one spot, and so you can clearly track your spending habits. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money's dashboard gives you a clear view of your expenses across all of your accounts. You can easily create a personalized budget with custom categories to help keep track of your spending. See your monthly spending trends in each category and know exactly where your money's going, and you can get alerts if bills increase in price, there's unusual spending activity, or if you're close to going over budget. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you. They automatically scan your bills to find opportunities to save, then you can ask them to negotiate for you. They'll deal with customer service so you don't have to. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year using all of their app's premium features. So, cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/checkthemic today. That's rocketmoney.com/checkthemic.
I hate dealing with customer service so much. I'm convinced that that's how these companies get you. Like, it's built into the model that most people will most people will not want to sit through this phone call because it's so painful, so we make money. Like, yeah, whenever we eventually get to the persistent person, we're going to have to give that guy his money back or a discount or whatever, maybe even, add some bells and whistles in there, but most people will never get that far because they value their existence.
I got to mentally prepare when I got to make a customer. Like, all right, let me set aside an hour, maybe more.
Can't do it.
And sit down and make sure.
No, not having it. So Rocket Money, they'll do it for you.
Go do it right now. All right, we got some Shouty Shows.
You want to hit the breaking news first?
Oh, what do we have here?
Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers is declaring for the NFL draft.
All right. So this is
an error?
It's not that surprising. He's had 4 years of college, 3-year starter at Texas.
Yeah.
Arch Manning was going to be taken over next year, I think, regardless.
Right.
There were some late rumors because Quinn Ewers' season tapered off, didn't go as well as hoped, even though they made it to the college football playoff semifinal, that maybe Quinn Ewers, he still has one more year of eligibility if he wants it. Would he transfer? Would he transfer back to Ohio State? Were some fun, scenarios. But he's going to the NFL draft. You did hear Sark came out, and Ewers has been injured parts of 3 straight years, and that's going to be a part of his profile. But Sark came out and talked him up and said, look, he worked through this. People don't realize how much he worked through, and complimented him, his leadership, and all that. He did not look like a first-round quarterback, performance-wise. I don't think. I mean, there were points over the last couple of years where you say, hey, here's signs of life. I thought at the Michigan game earlier this year, I was like, man, I love the way this guy runs an offense, keep progressing. He'll have his name called maybe round 1. I'm not sure he's there, though, based off of the 3 years as a starter.
He fits into the Carson Beck category for me, where like before this season, Carson Beck was the player everybody expected to be the top quarterback off the board and maybe, number 1 overall. And then he played like crap for a lot of the year. And so he's being a final year mercenary NIL for hire and is now quarterback in Miami, right? I'm very surprised that Quinn Ewers is not doing that because I don't think his draft stock is very high at all based off that season. And okay, it might not get any higher if he does it again somewhere else, but at least you can cash in on the 1-year mercenary for hire NIL money now in a way that you couldn't previously, right? So this is like this interesting landscape where there's enough money in college that you're probably better off if you're going to go at a low enough level in the draft, and you can do the transfer without penalty thing that you couldn't years ago. So I'm really surprised that Ewers has decided to come out now because I really don't see him getting drafted high.
It's a weaker class. By the way, I was getting ready. I was fully prepared for my Carson Beck buy low takes.
In the draft?
In the draft. Like, if he declared for the draft, he's got this elbow injury that's going to affect him, and, take him in round 4. Buy low on Carson Beck, but don't take him higher than that, if he lasts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying you don't draft.
But we don't have that. He's going to Miami now.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying you don't draft these guys, but I think they're going to get drafted that low based off the seasons that they had, or certainly Beck would have. That's why he stayed. And Ewers, I think, will as well, but he's decided to come out instead. I'm kind of surprised. I've never really seen it with him, to be honest. Like, he was a guy that Trevor Sickman was telling me to watch when we were doing, the early draft evaluations on the show back then. And I was like, really? doesn't look very good. And then he's got worse from that point, if anything. I genuinely remain confused and quite shocked that this is the guy. I don't really know how college recruiting works generally, right? All I do know about him is that he has the perfect composite score, the highest score of all time given out to one of these high school recruits, like higher than any super freak athlete quarterback prospect ever, like the perfect 1,000 or whatever it is score. I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense to me. He's not a huge athlete. He doesn't have an absolute, howitzer of an arm. I just don't understand how you see him as the perfect prospect. And he's never played like that in college. I just don't get it.
He skipped his senior year of high school. And it wasn't, a lot of seniors graduate a semester early just to early enroll. He went a full year.
So that's like the
early.
one thing in his favor is that he was younger than all these other guys.
Yes.
But still, I don't understand how he's the chosen one in terms of high school recruitment circles.
Yeah, I think ultimately he's become like a decent game manager-y type. I don't think he's got a massive arm. I do believe the lack of high-end talent in the draft probably influenced him. So here's what the consensus board. Now, I'll reference this a lot, I think, during draft season here. NFLmockdraftdatabase.com. They do a great job of just accumulating everyone's big boards, mock drafts. The consensus board right now is Cam Ward at 1, Shedeur Sanders at 2. That's overall in the draft class. Jalen Milroe at 21 for Alabama. Quinn Ewers at 51. So the fourth quarterback in the consensus board. Jackson Dart is at 85, and I heard rumblings that I know there's a Jackson Dart.
Rumblings.
Yes. I know there's a Jackson Dart data-driven hive, right? There's a hive of Jackson Dart people. If you look at some of the stats and the data, Jackson Dart looks outstanding. But, hearing rumblings that, he might be the guy that is getting more first-round love maybe than he should be.
Well, somebody has to.
Or than he is now. Somebody has to, right? The supply and demand is going to be fascinating. Other players, Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel, Kyle McCord, Riley Leonard, 2 of those guys, playing next Monday in the national title game. Curtis Rourke. So not a lot of big names, but names that are definitely intriguing maybe as, round 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, particularly, if you don't like the top 2, right? Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward. If you still need a quarterback, you're going to have to find somebody. Like, you can look at it and say, well, none of these guys are worth that big. Well, then, okay, what's your plan at quarterback? Because Sam Darnold just imploded. Is Daniel Jones your reclamation project? Teams like the Raiders or whatever. You need a starter. And if you don't have one, you're going to have to take the gamble at somebody. Is your gamble a veteran gamble that you don't believe will work out, or is it a rookie gamble that you don't believe will work out? Either way, you're going to be playing the crappy end of the odds somewhere.
This is where Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins, as potential options, probably a good year to be the veteran option here. All right, let's get to the Shouty Shows. We have a few here. It's going to be a fun one. I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's go.
This kid is Lamar plus Mahomes. That's what I would do. I would look at Jaden Daniels and the Philadelphia roster. Remember, this is the worst roster Jaden Daniels is going to have. They got cap space, and they're not paying that kid for 4 years. And he, at least as a rookie, he moves better than Mahomes and throws better than Lamar as a rookie. His poise in the fourth quarter doesn't make sense. I got records in front of me that he set. And here's the thing. The NFL gives you an all-time quarterback legend about every 6 years. And I'm talking Peyton Manning, Elway, Mahomes, Favre. I'm talking the best of the best, Brady. You get a legend every 6 years. I'm telling you, he singularly won a road playoff game. And I thought Andrew Luck was the best quarterback I ever saw as a rookie. He had a terrible roster. Washington doesn't have a terrible roster. It's better than Andrew Luck's. And this kid, maybe not Andrew Luck, but I'm telling you, he's in the sidecar. He's right next to him. This must have been what listening to Mozart was like. And you're like, how is this Mozart guy so good so early? That's what I feel like. What am I watching here?
Wow. Mozart. I've never heard it pronounced that way.
Mozart.
Right.
Jaden Daniels
is
a combination.
Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Mozart, whoever that is.
Correct.
Right.
I'm very impressed with Jaden Daniels.
Yeah. I wasn't aware that it was as regimented as every 6 years, like a very precise comment. Every 6 years you get a superstar quarterback.
Yeah.
Well, really, you should just time it. If you're the Raiders,
trade
right?
down.
Right. Figure out when the 6th year is and just aim for the number 1 pick that
Keep
year.
trading into future seasons.
Right.
Jaden's pretty special, obviously.
Yeah.
It looks pretty special. I think I hate the way that was parsed, which was when he does this one thing better than Mahomes and this one thing better than Lamar Jackson. Therefore, if you add it up.
But he further narrowed the parameters to rookie Lamar and rookie Mahomes. Rookie Mahomes, remember, who played 1 game, and rookie Lamar, who had been practicing with the wrong football and couldn't really throw it properly yet.
Wasn't throwing well.
So yes, he probably is better than both rookie Mahomes and rookie Lamar on the basis that rookie Lamar wasn't that good and rookie Mahomes basically didn't see the field. So if you want to be that narrow, there's quite a lot of quarterbacks that were better than rookie Mahomes and rookie Lamar, even put together.
And the problem with making those statements is kind of like what Matt Harmon was saying. I hate the word generational, and I agree with that, right? Like, you hate the word generational because it paints this picture of he therefore needs to produce better than the best of the generation. So if you say he's Lamar plus Mahomes, it's like, all right, so he's going to have Lamar about to be 3-time MVP here. He's going to be 3-time plus MVP plus a 3-time plus Super Bowl winner. Like, he's going to be both all in one. It's a little early for that. Very impressed with Jaden Daniels, and I get like the calm, the ability to win in different ways. Love all of it, but man.
Let me counter with, I actually like the term generational. I just think that it's been wildly overused. I think that generational is a lot like comparisons. It's a useful tool. It's a good descriptor. It's just the problem is we're applying it to everybody, and it's no longer, it's lost meaning.
Generation, it's become annual.
It's changed its meaning. It's like, remember when the dictionary like literally included, it changed the definition of literally to include actually not literally, like metaphorically is now literally in the dictionary. We just misused literally so often that the solution was, you know what, let's not correct people anymore. Let's just change the way the word is used. Like, everyone is screwing this up so much. We're just going to change what the word means as opposed to correcting people. Generational has now been misused so much that we simply can't use generational anymore because it just means mid.
To be whatever
generational now just means the top quarterback prospect of that class.
Nobody cares about truth anymore.
So we just need to change the meaning. We don't correct people and say, no, actually generational is once, every generation or so. We have to just now say, you're just thinking about it wrong. Generational simply means the best prospect that year.
Yes. That's
the
what
top
happens.
guy is now generational.
That's what happened. You asked about high school recruiting. That's what happens. Every quarterback is like, this is the best quarterback recruit since
Quinn Ewers simply became a victim of the generational flood.
Every number 1 QB.
Generational
recruit.
saturation is Quinn Ewers.
All right, let's get to the next one.
I don't think Jordan Love has shown me anything that really made me feel like, oh my God, he's one of the guys. He's a guy that can win it all. I said it early in the season. I said, that's why they got Josh Jacobs. They don't trust the quarterback. They're going to treat him like a rookie, a $55 million rookie, but a rookie. They're going to run the ball well. They're going to limit his pass attempts because they don't want him to throw the game away. And they think if they have to lean on his arm, he'll throw the game away. But if somebody's able to stop the run, like the Philadelphia Eagles, then they're going to have a big issue because they're going to have to take the training wheels off and they're going to have to let him throw the ball. And he hasn't shown that he can take care of the ball at a high level. He's a hater. He hates Green Bay. The truth is the truth, whether you want to believe it or not. And I told them, I said it, the tape will speak louder than I can ever speak.
Debut on the show.
Yeah, welcome, Richard Sherman, to the Shouty Shows.
Former colleague, of course.
It's a pretty lukewarm take, I think. I think it's all right.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with the take, really. Sherman's an interesting one because he has a very gatekeeping way of approaching NFL analysis and commentary. Basically, if you are a worse player than Richard Sherman, your opinion is invalid in his eyes. If you didn't play, your opinion is dirt. Like, you don't even count. I'm not even engaging in the conversation with you if you didn't play.
He won't acknowledge
If
us.
you played and you didn't play as well as me, I'll talk, but I'm dismissing you, right? Like, on the broadcast, he was like ripping Ryan Fitzpatrick. He was like, well, if you know about the playoffs, no offense, Fitz, because Fitz famously never played in the playoffs. So it's like Ryan Fitzpatrick has like 220 touchdowns or whatever in the NFL, and yet his opinion now, because we're in postseason football, to Richard Sherman is basically irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's like,
You don't know what it's like.
I'll listen to you until up until week 18, but now we've hit postseason. Just take a seat. I got it from here. You know, I've been to Super Bowls. I've won a championship. You never even played January football. What would you know? You've never been there.
It's all different.
So yeah, he doesn't tend to get that shouty actually, but I do find him interesting because it's a very hierarchical way of approaching analysis. Like I saw the other day, Ryan Fitzpatrick and Dan Orlovsky. Dano got into it on Twitter, and it's like in Richard Sherman's eyes, Fitz wins that because he was a better quarterback. Like, doesn't matter what the conversation was.
You fall into that sometimes. You do that. Like, why should I listen to backup quarterback? I won't name any names. Why should I listen to backup quarterback who's just a backup? It's like, well, he's still one of the top 50 in the world.
I'm perfectly prepared to have, like, I think that their opinion is no less valid. I just think that they should have some self-awareness sometimes when they're making declarations. Like, I don't.
But then think about the self-awareness we would have to have. I merely topped out
as a
flag football champion.
Right. We do regularly. Like, I think that there is something.
But that's why I tell you can't call people bad then. Oh, because they're better than you.
My problem is not, like, Dan Orlovsky can comment on whatever he wants. He can break down whatever he wants. He can analyze whatever he wants. But if Dan Orlovsky starts to get sanctimonious about a player's awareness in the end zone, for example, the hypocrisy would start to blind you a little bit, right? The burning in your eyes would get a little bit too much. So that's my point with all that stuff. Is like you should this is why quite regularly we joke about, second team all IAFL career here, right? Like, you have to have that awareness. Otherwise, at some point, you're going to stray into the world of, like, let me tell you how it was without any real idea of what I'm talking about. I just think it's interesting that in Sherman's eyes, he sees this whole thing as a very hierarchical, like, your opinion is only as valid as your playing career was.
Just to touch on the take really quickly here, this is all Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes' fault. It's all their fault because they've won all the championships. So now, I mean, this happened last year, Wild Card Weekend. As soon as a team loses, it becomes this referendum on everything that they've ever done, particularly the quarterback and or the head coach. This happened to Tua last year. Tua went into Kansas City, couldn't win. He just can't win the big one. Can't do it. Jordan Love, he lost in the divisional round last year, lost in the wild card round this year. He's out. He's done. If Brady and Mahomes weren't winning every championship for the last decade plus, right, you would have more Joe Flacco randoms and Matthew Stafford randoms. You'd have more random championship quarterbacks, and you would say, it just wasn't Jordan Love's year. One of these years he could still get one. Didn't have a good playoff game. One of these years he could do it. He could go on the run. Tua could go on the run. Kirk Cousins could go on the run. But unfortunately, it's weird that the league of parity league here, has become very top-heavy when it comes to actual championships, and it's trickled down into all of our analysis that you're either one of those guys or you're not. And if you're not, it's just like, all right, you just can't do it ever.
We're at basically 25 years, a quarter of a century at this point, of the main winners of the Super Bowl being Brady or Mahomes. Collectively, out of almost a quarter of a century, Brady and Mahomes have 10 of them. Like, that's an absurd ratio of Super Bowls, which leaves not that many to be shared around amongst everybody else. I always felt this way when you start looking retrospectively at, like, Joe Montana's career, all these other guys, right? The number of times that these all-time great teams ran up against other all-time great teams in the NFC Championship game, or even just right earlier in the playoffs. And before Brady in particular, but now Mahomes rocked up on the scene, at least those guys would eventually get a ring. And, it was, okay, you only got one. And the guy that was sort of left with nothing was Dan Marino. But generally speaking, somebody at least got over the hump once. And you're like, okay, it's validation. We can at least now recognize that they were great. Now it's like these teams may never get one. There may be more Dan Marinos now. And guys like Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and whoever, Joe Burrow may have already had his Dan Marino season and may never get back there.
And if you expand Brady and Mahomes to just the elite quarterbacks of your generation, the top four of your generation, you had one for Rodgers and one for Breeze and two for Peyton, and elite quarterbacks, like the top 4 or 5 of their generation, you could call Big Ben 4 or 5, whatever of his generation, the top 4, 5, 6 of your generation get the majority of the rings. So if you're just outside that, it's like, oh, can't do it. Can't do it. Jordan Love. Can't do it, never going to do it. Anyway, let's go. Next one.
You think last night's about Sam Darnold?
Hell yes!
You're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. You're out of your mind.
Oh, please.
You're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. You're out of your mind.
Please.
Last night, Stephen A., I would put Sam Darnold at 4th or 5th when it comes to reasons why that game went the way that it went. Number one, Shula, all he really did was copy Aaron Glenn. Number two, I would tell you, their offensive line in Minnesota got absolutely demolished by the Rams defensive line. By the way, America, Rams have the best young defensive line in football they had since October. Okay, so they got demolished. I don't think there's 5 quarterbacks in the league that were going to play good last night in Minnesota's situation. I'd say the third thing, and this is probably the most surprising, I really thought, and I think the world of him, Kevin O'Connell got out-coached. That's a huge part of this as well. Kevin O'Connell got out-coached. Then I would put Sam Darnold at maybe 4th or 5th. Sam Darnold wasn't going to do much last night. No quarterback outside of like Lamar, Patrick, Josh Allen was going to do much. So we can have the, oh my gosh, Sam Darnold stunk reality or conversation, or we can have the reality that offensive line got embarrassed by a better defensive line.
That actually cuts out the best part about that was there was more Stephen A. hysteria that I saw off the back of that. Like at one point he was literally sicking Shannon Sharp on Dano. He was like, "Get him, Shannon, get him!" and Shannon, I think I don't know, the clip I saw cut off at that point. I think Shannon was then about to sick him, but we cut off all of that in favor of just Dano's argument.
It's a beautiful balance between your Shannon and Stephen A. are going to be a little bit more simplistic. You know, Shannon used to play, so he's allowed to talk.
So his opinion counts more, certainly in the eyes of Richard.
But he's
Sherman.
not grinding film like Dano is right now, and they're gonna lean more to QB, right? It's QB's fault or it's QB's credit, and Dano is always going to default to what could the quarterback do? It's all the coaches.
Quarterback
Dano defends. I mean, he's the guy that has 25 top 10 quarterbacks. He is going to defend the quarterback to no end. Other than there's a couple that he doesn't mind jabbing a little bit. I think Dak's one of them. From what I've seen,
I disagree quite vehemently about his analysis of this game. I think he's very, very wrong, which I hate because that means I'm agreeing with Stephen A. Smith. I think you would struggle to come up with 4 or 5 things that were, in order of impact, more detrimental to the Minnesota Vikings than Sam Darnold's play in this game.
Kernels of truth, though. The kernel of truth there was what we broke down at the beginning of the show here. He was under constant pressure. You and I used to always talk about, hey, if you're under pressure 40+% of the time in a game, you've got no chance. That is a breaking point. You don't have a chance. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to get sacked 9 times. Right, and that's where it's there were better options there.
Right.
But even if he turned those sacks into throwaways, right, you're still talking about they got beat up front.
I think his analysis was just
they
wrong.
Weren't going to score more than 15 points in this game, probably.
The Fitzpatrick-Dano conversation was Dano running through the tape saying his receivers are covered all the time, and Fitz saying, actually, they're not. If you actually look at this play, here's an open guy.
Yeah.
And at some point,
if he's supposed to throw this to the back who has a step. And
that was one specific play Fitz pulled out. And the funny thing is, this is the hilarious thing about Twitter, right? You look at the replies, and people are dragging Fitzpatrick for well, this is why you threw 150 career interceptions, underestimating how covered a guy is. It's the dude also threw 220-something touchdowns. Fitzpatrick was quite a successful player in general terms, right? And he's being dragged as this idiot on Twitter by people who've never played the game.
Lack of physical, doesn't have great arm.
I know I just kind of ripped Richard Sherman for this gatekeeping approach to the world, but you are dragging this dude, this Harvard-educated, quite successful NFL quarterback, for being a moron on Twitter. It's what are you doing? Anyway, the point is, on that one play, Fitzpatrick was look, this play is literally designed for the running back, and he doesn't throw it, and the running back is open on the play. Later in the video, there's plays where Dano's just going, covered, pointing at receivers, some of whom are open. He's just tagging them as covered, regardless of whether that's true or not, to make a point. So I think Dano's wrong in a bunch of different ways on this topic. And actually, the Rams did not copy Aaron Glenn's approach to this. What Aaron Glenn did is blitz the ever-living crap out of Sam Darnold and played man coverage on the backside, and the Vikings had no answers for that. The Rams did not do that. A lot of those plays early, they were not playing man coverage at all. In fact, what they were doing is sitting back in a zone coverage where they had 4 or 5 guys underneath and 3 on the back, and the Vikings were running these play concepts that they had to clear the first line first, right? So this is part of the problem, is that the play designs had to wait until they cleared the first line of underneath defenders to then come in behind. And at that point, whatever's happening up front, whether it's just a 4-man rush, whether it's a sim pressure, whether it's a stunt or whatever, has already gotten home at that point, right? So this is where there's the kernel of truth, is it was an institutional failure. There were problems everywhere. But Darnold, I think, was probably the principal problem, which is, I ran through those sacks before. I think you can get 6 deep before you find one where the biggest problem was something else. Darnold was collapsing in front of our eyes for the second straight week. And I don't think that that's an avoidable reality. Like, you can't come out of that and say, there were other problems as well, so Darnold is the 5th problem. No, I think Darnold was probably the first problem, maybe the second, and other things were also bad.
Dano's going to generally default. We need to get Dano on the show here.
Yeah.
At some point. He's generally going to default to defending the QB.
Sure, and I think in a lot of instances that's true. That's correct. That's not an unsound approach. And in, like, if you want to give him the charitable analysis of this, I think it's fair to say Darnold was terrible, but other things contributed to it. But I don't think you can come out of this and say, like, Darnold wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
Like, if the other things were, like, the logic of his conclusion is essentially, if Kevin O'Connell called a slightly better game, and by the way, that you can't explain, like, we talked the second sack, the bubble screen. Like, Kevin O'Connell called something different, and Darnold went rogue and took a sack. That's not on O'Connell. Anyway, so if you say O'Connell called a slightly better game and the offensive line played better, your logic is Darnold plays out of his mind at that point, and the Vikings, are in the game, win the game, whatever. I don't think that's happening. Like, if do you think that if that offensive line played an above average game against the Rams and O'Connell called some slightly better plays, that Darnold plays well then?
I mean, I do think he'd play much better, because
that's not what I asked. Well,
see, that's tough, because I think a lot of his issues have been under pressure the last couple weeks.
Sure.
But yeah, he's not seeing it, and like you said we didn't even mention it today. Even his completions were inaccurate.
Yeah.
Right? The play Hawkinson touchdown.
That's what I'm saying.
He's got to go back and catch it, and then he creates after the catch. So yeah, I think Darnold probably plays an average game at best, even if you cut down on 10 to 12 pressures.
At which point, I don't think you can dismiss him as
I wouldn't.
A principal source of the problem.
And Shouty Shows you can, though.
Of course, you can do whatever you want in the Shouty Show, as long as you do it loud enough.
What else do we have here?
Mike Tomlin, Mike T, I've said this many times, he's the one coach, if I could play in the NFL, I'd want to play for him, because I think he's one of the all-time greatest motivators ever. And now I'm talking about Mike McCarthy being the worst motivator ever. I would run through a wall for Mike Tomlin, while Mike McCarthy is a wallflower to me. I wouldn't run through the wallflowers out in the garden for Mike McCarthy. You have to be a CEO. You have to be a commanding officer. You have to have charisma and leadership and fire and the ability to impose your will and your desire on a locker room. And Mike McCarthy never had that. He just had Aaron Rodgers for one hot Super Bowl run as a road wild card underdog. So I'm thinking yesterday, I love that idea. But I can't imagine, even though Mike McCarthy's from Pittsburgh, the Steelers would want him.
As he's saying charisma and fire to own a locker room type of thing, I'm just picturing Bill Belichick in his monotone style. Not that he doesn't command the locker room,
right?
But like stylistically, you're not like, oh, look how charismatic Bill is, leading the boys.
So what I liked about that clip was vintage Shouty Show technique of taking a guy's resume and reducing it down to an accident, right? Like Mike McCarthy, sure, he's won a Super Bowl, but it was one lucky year with Aaron Rodgers as a wild card. Like, it didn't count.
Underdog.
That doesn't really count. That's
Underdog.
Just, you got lucky one year. Rodgers played really well. Like, he basically equated that championship for the Green Bay Packers with the 2007 or 11 Giants team, right? Where They were very average, and then Eli caught fire for an absurd run in the playoffs, and they knocked everybody off and won a championship. He's basically saying that Packers team, same as the Giants. Same as the 11 Giants, where they were not that good, but they caught fire for the correct 4 games, and therefore won. Vintage, that's good. Where I would say, I'm getting the sad vibes from Skip. It's not, we heard Stephen A. before, right? Second Dan O made his point. Stephen A. was like hopped up to the gills, was like, the excitement, the volume, the hyperactivity was all there. Skip's just going through the motions. He's checked out. There's no vibrancy. I mean, ironically,
there's a lot going on.
Ironically,
over there.
He right now is what he is describing Mike McCarthy as. There's no fire. There's no passion. It's drab.
I mean, because he's pushing for a ticket of Mike Tomlin and Cooper Rush. That seems to be his dream ticket.
Right.
How excited could you be?
I think Skip has lost the inspiration for being a Shouty Show.
I would ask if I was his co-host on his.
There's not a co-host.
I know anymore. That. I'm just saying if we were, I would say based off all this previous evidence, are you telling me that Cooper Rush is the quarterback that Mike Tomlin is missing to get to the Super Bowl? That's what's been missing in Pittsburgh, and that Tomlin is what's missing in Dallas.
The way with football analysis, you always ask, is he dealing with off-field distractions? That's why, when the player, he likes playing the clarinet. Well, that's a red flag. I mean, does he love football that much? That's a problem. It's a distraction, right? Do we want to sign this player who's dealing with some issues? Well, no, it's a distraction. We can't have a distraction. Do you think Skip Bayless is just distracted at the moment?
Yeah, he's clearly dealing with distractions that we will not touch here whatsoever. We already passed on that. We passed on that last week, guys. Don't put us in that situation again. All right, what else we got here?
I wanted Deion Sanders. I still want Deion Sanders. I'm still hoping against hope that Deion will say, yeah, I was born to coach the Dallas Cowboys, for whom I played with and won a Super Bowl. Deion still has a home in Dallas. He raised his children in Dallas. Shador came up through the ranks in Dallas.
Where's the passion?
But I'm pretty sure, according to my brother Lil Wayne, that Deion is committed heart and soul to Boulder, Colorado, to Colorado University. See you, I see you. And he's recruited 2 really good quarterbacks for next year. And I just don't think he could leave them high and dry to go to Dallas.
What is he doing?
Where's the oomph?
Even the one-liners can't even spit out the one-liners. Wait, well done to our producers. He wants Tomlin and Deion equally. He can't have both.
Can we just? I don't think we can let it slide that the words, according to my brother Lil Wayne, left his mouth in that sequence.
We don't know their relationship.
No, you can't. His delivery is so sad and monotonous that that can just slip right on by you.
No, I caught it. Oh, Skip. It's like the whispery shows now.
What is that? That's not Shouty Show. That's just a dude going through the motions. Skip has now become a sad husk of himself.
He's Cam Magruder, sad Cowboys fan.
Yeah. It's depressing. I mean...
So much so that he wants both Mike Tomlin and Deion Sanders in back-to-back clips here.
I hate Skip Bayless's entire career, but it's kind of sad hearing him just be this fake shell of himself now.
That's what happens when you're distracted.
Very distracted.
Coming off of bad, it's been a rough year.
About 1.5 million distractions from what I remember.
Allegedly. We'll see what all happens.
Well, no, the 1.5 million distractions are legit. It's just allegedly whether or not they're going to be relevant or not,
Correct.
Yeah. So 1.5 million distractions, which may or may not be a problem.
It's showing up with no fire.
No fire.
No fire whatsoever.
No fire at all.
The Cowboys.
And then, ironically...
Who do you think he actually wants, though?
Pontificating about other people's lack of fire. This is what I'm saying, right? This is the Dan O, have some awareness of running out of your end zone thing. Skip's out here bitching about the fire, sounding like a dude who's just reading through his electricity bill. That's not... come on, what are we doing?
He's reading through his electricity bill. I want Deion Sanders. I want Mike Tomlin.
Right. My big problem here is that this guy coaches with a complete and total lack of fire. And if you're going to have a complete and total lack of fire, how can I possibly respect anything that's coming out of your mouth?
You need to bring the fire and energy.
I'm ironically banging on about it. I'm still sounding more engaged than he was. This It's miserable.
Skip's
from this
banned.
point on,
he's banned from Shouty
I don't.
Shows.
Yeah, I don't
He's
want
banned.
Skip back on the
Skip's out.
Shouty Show thing until I get
You're
real
out.
passion out of his mouth.
See?
Oh my God.
See?
For anyone listening, they've just thrown up a picture on the screen of Skip and his brother, Lil Wayne.
They are.
That's
I
insane.
told you we didn't know the history there.
Right.
They're
I mean,
tight.
they've at least met based off that
They've
photograph.
At least met. They've at least met.
Wow.
You don't think they're on a text chain together? You don't think Skip maybe runs some of his takes by Lil Wayne here?
I don't know.
On the way to
I'm just saying, Skip
bringing him out.
Skip should be banned from the Shouty Show segment
he's
until
out.
we get more fire and passion back in his voice.
Completely agree. He's out. I would lose him from Mount Rushmore too.
Oh yeah.
He's got to be banned.
Strip him from Mount Rushmore.
We need a new.
Meanwhile,
we need a new Rushmore.
they threw in the chat that Nick Wright just referred to the Chiefs game against the Texans as the final practice of the year for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I bet he did it with more interest in his voice than Skip did there.
Is he the worst fan of a good team in
worst
history?
fan.
Right. You know how like the fan of the good team, right?
mean,
like
he's
when the team, like Alabama fans for years, they're like, this just you lose in the SEC championship or something. It's like, it's all crumbling. It's all terrible. It's like you just won 7 titles in 10 years or whatever. Get yourself together. Is Nick Wright the worst person to be a fan of a team that's dominant? Because he makes statements like that.
But he's
Practice game here, divisional round.
But he's being like a deliberate troll. Like he's needling you because he knows it will get a reaction. Like I think.
But then you could back it up. Like he's Portnoy had this.
Yeah, but Portnoy was more of a
as a
dick
Patriots
about it.
fan.
That's the thing. Like Nick's, it's designed as funny. Like it's part of his shtick. It's kind of funny when he's doing this. Whereas Portnoy was just an asshole about it. I think that's slightly different.
Nick refers to the Chiefs game against the Texans as the, quote, final practice of the year,
Yeah.
end quote. Real season starts in the AFC Championship.
What I think would be really, like, it must be incredibly...
bulletin board material.
Yeah, it must be incredibly frustrating for people that don't like him because they're always going to win. Like that's the thing that drives people nuts is that Nick is
That's what I mean.
making all these statements about
Because
the Chiefs.
they can back it up.
And it's the Chiefs. Like if he just happened to be a fan of the Rams or whatever, it's like you got one win in the last 15 years.
That's what I'm saying. He's leaning into this because he knows that they're probably going to back it up and he's going to just sit there and, be right.
Yeah, be right. Nick Wright.
Yes.
That's also going to annoy people.
That his name's right. But people
A lot
call
of
him
puns.
People call him Nick wrong.
They do.
Which is pretty sharp.
Call him Nick wrong.
All right, we got what is it? Divisional round weekend. I got my PrizePicks lineup for divisional round. See, you get to lose Skip's banned from the.
At least until he starts shouting again.
Let's just put a silhouette there. Just black him out from the Mount Rushmore.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna set my PrizePicks lineup here for the divisional round. I've got 4 projections I'm going for this week. I got a little aggressive here. We're gonna start with Josh Allen.
Is this you've been swayed by Ben Allen hitting on a giant however many?
Producer Ben made about $900
Yeah.
the other day on
He
his
had like a
PrizePicks lineup.
9-person lineup
I think
or
it was
whatever.
6, 7.
Whatever it was. A lot. And it all came in.
Needed Matthew Stafford more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. Got that in the first half.
Yes.
On Monday night. So we were very excited for Ben. Great job. And it's a win for all of us here on Check the Mic. It's not just Ben. So checks in the mail, I'm sure.
You're claiming that one as the show win?
Yeah, show win.
All right.
He's part of the show.
Sure.
So congrats to Ben. I was inspired. I'm going to go with 4 here. Josh Allen, we're going to go more than 239.5 passing yards. Going to need to throw the ball against the Ravens. I'm expecting a lot of Josh Allen this week. I checked the rushing total. It's kind of high already. I do think it's one of those games where they're going to lean on him as a runner, but he's going to need to throw for more than the 239.5. So I like that. Josh Allen passing. I'm going to go DeAndre Hopkins, more than 30.5 receiving yards, right? This is his chance at a ring. He's getting after it. I don't think he's too old. He still has it. There's been a lot of just misses with Patrick Mahomes this year, a lot of contested catches that I think Hopkins is going to make a statement here during the playoffs. So I got more than 30.5 receiving yards for him. Similar with Amari Cooper here. I got Amari Cooper more than 21.5 receiving yards. This is his opportunity. They traded for him for moments like this when Khalil Shakir and James Cook and everyone else is taken away. Amari Cooper's going to have to win some one-on-ones. They have a matchup advantage with Brandon Stevens on the other side with Baltimore. So I think, 2 catches here. He gets more than this, 21.5 receiving yards. And then Patrick Mahomes, more than 12.5 longest rush. He did this on his first run against the Texans the last time around. This is Mahomes' time.
And playoff Mahomes, always scampering away.
He's going to have a 20, a 25. He's going to have it probably in crunch time more than 12 and a half as his longest rush. So playing playoff history here with Mahomes and, the two big-name receivers, DeAndre Hopkins and Cooper, stepping up during playoff time, and then Allen needing to be relied upon. So quick recap. Josh Allen, more than 239.5 passing yards. DeAndre Hopkins, more than 30.5 receiving yards. Amari Cooper, more than 21.5 receiving yards. And then Patrick Mahomes will have a longest rush that is more than 12.5 yards.
All right. I can see. I quite like a lot of that. The Amari Cooper thing.
You can steal some for your lineup tomorrow if you want.
Maybe I will. Maybe we don't do that. We haven't really done that at all this year.
We haven't done a whole lot of crossover.
Maybe we should.
I also, by the way, there's a little Josh Allen throwing to Amari Cooper there. There's, some dependencies, stack even.
Well, the frustrating thing about that Bills offense is, anybody can go off in a given week. It makes it get frustrating trying to figure out who it's going to be. Allen, I was like, he's going to be running a lot last week. He's going to be finding those creative deep shots, and he was targeting everybody except Keon Coleman on those last week. The one guy. Yeah. I needed one of those plays. It's like, no, we're going to hit.
Coleman's going to get one of those.
Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Dawson Knox, or Dalton Kincaid, whichever tight end it was. Like anyone except Keon Coleman.
Well, this week he's going to Amari Cooper.
All right.
You guys can join as well. Get $50. Play $50. Get $5 free. Check the mic.
Nice.
Get $50 instantly when you play. I just flipped that around after this entire season. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. Promo code check the mic. It's because I couldn't read it. PrizePicks app. Go check it out. We'll just cut that part out.
Oh, yeah.
Well done. All right. One last thing before we go here.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of almost the off season here. There's only 4 games to preview tomorrow, 4 games to review. We're into free agency. We're into the draft. We're into mailbag season. So we're going to need even more interaction. There was a great mailbag question about Jordan Davis that I want to touch on in the next couple of weeks. Draft analysis around Jordan Davis. Those are the types of things that we can dive into right now. So check the mic at the33rdteam.com. Send us your emails, and that's going to be – we could drop these on any shows as we get into the offseason, but Wednesday in particular, mailbag-heavy type of show. You guys can help inspire what we talk about. Check the mic at the33rdteam.com.
And in particular, we are planning out the extravaganza of the Check the Mic Awards show, which we're going to have to do at some point. So we're going to do the regular awards, the official AP type ones that I vote on. So we'll do all those as well, but we want to have some show-specific ones as well. One of which, at least, we're going to need some help with, I think, from the people. I think a good one would be the Shouty Show segment of the year. Like, what is the most ridiculous Shouty Show thing that you have seen this year? So if you have submissions for that, fire them in to any of our usual points of contact, but in particular, email, check the mic at the33rdteam.com if you have the best Shouty Show submission of the year.
I will let our listeners create their own category if they want. So you can come up with your own category and answer, right? How about that?
What?
So you come up with, this is the, I don't know, whatever. You come up with your own category, and then here's what it was.
Right, but in particular, we're going to be doing that one and need some.
No, I know that, but I've just upped the ante even further. Come up with your own category for our award show, and then a top 1, top 3, whatever you want.
Okay,
it's open ended, and make sure you get the Shouty Show of the year in there.
Yeah. We'll have a bunch of other things, but in particular, that's one I think because we don't watch the Shouty Shows.
So we're doing this next week, full award show. You're just looking for an excuse to wear your tux.
Yeah, pretty much.
You bought a tux for your sister's wedding.
Yeah.
And now we're gonna use it on a.
Otherwise, it's gonna be sitting there in mothballs for the next 25 years. I'm gonna wear the tux.
I do not own a tux.
Okay.
Do I need to rent one for this?
What's the most formal you can get?
I think I have a fun alternative.
Yeah.
To the tux that will be.
We'll do that then.
That will be sufficient.
That would be neat because I feel like the tux has some corresponding authority with being an official AP voter. You're not an official AP voter, so you don't get to wear.
I'll look like the guy that's not allowed to have the AP.
So you don't get to wear formal attire.
All right.
You just have to wear something different.
Award show next week. Email us. Check the mic at the33rdteam.com. All right. Is that it for us today?
Yeah.
Anything else? End of show. That's the next on the rundown.
All
right.
Perfect.
Appreciate everybody being here. We've got a couple things really quick. previewing tomorrow, all 4 games, of course.
Yep.
That will be quick, right? We'll get that in under 2 hours, presumably.
Quickish.
And we might even drop a very first mock draft this week. We might get into mock draft season this week. We got Jim Nagy next week. It's probably going to drop Senior Bowl week. We're going to have him on previewing the Senior Bowl. We're going to be out there in less than 2 weeks now, heading out to the Senior Bowl. So we're into the off season and draft season, free agent season as the playoffs are going all at the same time here. Exciting times. Check the mic. All right. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow with our divisional round preview.